The Long Dark is a single-player survival game. The draw of this game is how difficult it is, mainly because how cold it is all the fucking time. I'll be honest, I'm not into survival games that require you having friends. I appreciate a good story like Subnautica, or the freedom of travel like in No Man's Sky. The PlayStation market isn't exactly flooded with survival games, so it's rare we get something this competent. The game begins with the main protagonist Will, who is visited by his ex-wife Astrid, who needs a pilot to take her up to northern Canada for some unknown reason. In the opening scene, the game establishes a mystery with a locked briefcase and its contents being withheld by Astrid. When you crash, you'll spend at least a day or two boiling water and eating moldy meat. After getting a handle on things, you being to start your journey to find Astrid and climbing out of the canyon, you end up in an old mountain town. You meet the Grey Mother, who sends you on a fetch quest that takes you throughout the first couple of levels. And you'll spend time hiding from wolves and collecting food and fuel for the Grey Mother to get through the winter. The game really slows down at this point, and it really falls back on exploration. It feels quite grindy and tedious and needs improvement. But at this point in the game, you'll meet a few characters and you'll make a few choices. One choice in particular had me questioning myself, especially as I write and reflect on it, due to the amount of guesswork that you actually do and not really think of, or at least that I wasn't aware of at the time. In the second act, you encounter the grizzly bear and get a hunting rifle. At this point, the game opens up and you start having the ability to kill wolves left and right. I felt like the fucking man at this point. It felt like I was able to actually fight the wolves and stay ahead of them at this point, and the game felt very easy. But, since it's a survival game, fuck you, here's a bear that can't be killed by bullets. At one point at the end of the first act, the game sends a fucking bear your way.
Not this again.
And eventually, the game culminates in a boss fight with a bear. And I'll say, as far as intimidation goes, when you're a fat schluck who pisses off a 1,000-pound bear who has a narc on for you, it gets pretty gosh darn intimidating. But you only truly fight him grand total of 3 times. All of them are scripted encounters at 3 major plot points in the game. In regard to themes, the game has some pretty interesting ones. Quiet apocalypse and how we rely on technology. It's depicted in the rapid decay of society after the apocalypse. Even before the apocalypse started, how we can abandon something and how we can die so quickly. Another interesting aspect of this is how, when you get to use the flashlight for brief periods of time during the night times with an aurora, it symbolizes to me anyway that, this limited use of a flashlight greatly improves the lives of a human being who has to rely on traditionally torches and fucking matches that can only light up about 3 whole fucking feet in front of them. So, good on them for using the theme and mixing it in with the gameplay. The animals range from deer and rabbits who flee, moose who are neutral, and predators who are aggro and capable of smelling you. Another mechanic are injuries which can be caused by certain animals and healed by certain medicines or medicine combinations. Of course, you eat, drink, and sleep. The game's 4th health bar is warm, and this is maintained and fed by staying near fires, wearing warm clothes, and finding areas protected from the cold. This makes the game pretty difficult. The wider range of temperatures you can find yourself in, most of them are variations of freezing your balls off, and due to a combination of these things, my first day was primarily spent with my head on a fucking swivel and my vision blurry. Thought I got too high and was seeing shit, so I went to bed. I played the next day and with the same blurry ass vision, and right after spinning the fucking bullshit wheel of what should die from this time, died from freezing to death, so fuck it. Okay, let's do this. I got this, I'm sure. Anyway, I do appreciate the tutorial part in the game. It really helps. Except for the part where you start to climb. By the end of the canyon level, you'll have to climb out. Before you do, you get a jagged piece of metal and pass a deer carcass. I won't lie, I appreciate the game helping me through, and I appreciate the game explaining the mechanics, but at this point I felt, especially when Will says out loud, "Gee, I should cut up the deer carcass," I felt like the game was treating me like a fucking dolt. Just a tiny bit. But again, I do appreciate the tutorial. And hell, maybe I'd be the same way when I'm half dead and blind from my stomach eating itself. I mentioned earlier that predators can smell you. It's called the scent system. It's simple. The more meat or the more blooded you are, the more you smell. This expands the aggro range of wolves and bears and will cause them to track you over distance. This is punishing at lower levels and somewhat more mitigated in the second act due to you having a gun and a stockpile of flares. One day I was hunting rabbits and heard howls, and saw the scent system on my screen. Not knowing what those meant, I decided in my blissful ignorance to run off back to my base anyway. The bastards followed me through a blizzard. They did not give up. Oh no, not when they smell brain-dead schmuck in the air. It's not all dead rabbits and ripped scrotums. In these encounters, you'll have a gun or a flare gun, and the noise can scare them off or straight up kill the wolf or bear. From time to time, the game would stutter, especially when you use a flare, and to top it all off, the game isn't pushing any graphical benchmarks, so what the fuck. I'll be honest with you too, the game can look downright beautiful in some areas, at the top of certain mountains, around certain caches, and certain environments. At one point, there's even one environment that looks very, very creepy and scared the shit out of me when I first saw it. I'll leave that up to you to see, but I'll say the game can look good at times. I'll give it credit. It has a style, it has a look, especially in its cutscenes. It is not pushing any graphical boundaries. It's not even comparable to any of these other games in its own genre. So it really shouldn't have these graphical issues that it has. But I'll have to cop to the fact that the damn scared the living shit out of me when it first turned on. I'm not gonna lie, I almost pissed myself. So, okay. As for the in-game sound, it's very minimal. You'll be hearing primarily footsteps and the occasional wolf howl. All this is pretty effective at setting up a tone, especially as the wind blows around you. The one issue I have with the sound is the way the gun is. It lacks impact, and the flare. But I see that they're going for a realistic approach to this, so I don't mind all that much. In fact, the rifle sound still sounds okay, especially in the backdrop of the silence and the wilderness, of course. As for the in-game soundtrack, it's absolutely haunting and beautiful, at least for a lot of the pieces in the soundtrack. My personal favorite is the intro. While it's only for a particular kind of survival player, someone who doesn't mind a bit of jank and a bit of loneliness, it also serves a very hardcore niche in the survival genre. The game only truly falters when it comes to the technical issues like the hiccups, bugs, the crashes, the drops in FPS at certain points in the story. I mentioned the technical issues that plague the game. The reason why I don't think that they're a big deal in the game is because the game has a really good autosave system that saves on a regular. In fact, most of the time I only lost about 20 minutes of progress at the very worst. The developers thought ahead of time. They really do need to improve the stability of the game. These crashes, in my opinion, really hurt parts of the storyline. Usually that's where they are in the game. For example, there's a point where you meet a certain character who you have to decide the fate of. Right after deciding the fate, my game crashed, and I was forced to watch it a second time. I cannot explain how little shits I give the second time around, especially when I think the game has a 50-50 shot of shitting itself right there on the spot. The game's cheap price, it's really much worth it for the $20 price tag, and it's a steal when it's anything cheaper. The developers update it on a yearly, and in fact, now they're about to add in 3 new episodes. Not about to, or plan to anyway. They should also add all the things from the sandbox mode into the campaign in some way. Of course, there are 3 more episodes to be added, so there's lots to be added in the future, and lots of potential in the future. They need to improve greatly, but there are only 2 episodes out of 5, so there's lots of potential, lots of room to grow. Some of these features range from the moose to updated UI, the audio and visuals of the campaign mode, and adding new missions and new storyline elements. Of course, this game is very much supported even years after its launch. Spoilers here, skip to the end if you don't want the game spoiled for you, but this game is old as fuck, so you should know at this point what the story is. At one point at the end of the second act, you have to fight a bear, and when you fight the bear, you have to fight the bear a total of 3 times. As you know, you have to use the shitty button-mashing struggle mechanic. But the first 2 fights are intense as hell. In fact, as you stare each other down amidst the blizzard and the freezing wind, man versus bear, the player versus the game. And as you 2 fight and you button mash, the bear can take bits out of you, and you can take bits out of the bear, thus making this a battle of attrition. As you begin to tape up your leaking parts and clash again, this duality and conflict is very well played, and I like this struggle that's shared between the characters, i.e. the player and Will. After the first 2 bear fights, on your way back to the mission area, you are attacked in a cutscene by the bear. It begins to drag you back to its lair and you wake up in its den. You have to stealth around in order to grab your spear and fight the bear at the end. This is the game's boss fight, the culmination of skill in the game. But the problem with the third bear fight is that the game doesn't test your skill. In fact, that this cave area completely cancels out most of the environmental effects provided by the overworld. This is a problem because this takes out most of the skill that we learned throughout the game. It makes most of that stuff useless. This feels like a pocket dimension. This cave feels like an awkward little piece of the game that shouldn't really exist and exists somewhere in a different dimension that we are forced to fight the bear in. I think it's a waste of mechanics. They should restructure this boss fight to incorporate the overworld instead of using this cave level. I know these cave levels exist in the game. I know the areas that are insulated from the outer weather. But goddamn, when you're fighting the ultimate predator in the game, I think you should incorporate every aspect of difficulty in the game. This boss fight is supposed to represent the difficulty. This is supposed to represent the most dangerous thing that this world has to throw at us at this point in time. And it's supposed to represent the skill as player, as we fight the elements, as we fight our hunger and our thirst and our sleepiness, as we fight this apex predator in the snow. I would even argue that this takes out most of the fun of the game. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the struggle mechanic is simple button mashing. It's really not that fun. So when you take out also the fun element, the difficult part of the game, there's no challenge, there's no risk. Most of it's just button mashing and frustration as you watch the stupid fucking bear death animation over and over again. Overall, I think this game has potential. It hits a lot of high marks, and for the asking price, it's very much worth it. The game has to improve in a few areas, mostly in the mission structure, boss fights, expanding its Wintermute mode, and fixing some of the bugs. But as I said, it's a $20 game. It's definitely worth the price, especially if you're into hardcore survival games, or if you like stories with some choices in it, and if you don't mind a little bit of jank, as I said before. Please like and subscribe, add suggestions in the comments. Be seeing you.